bring on now our buddy Alex Berenson, who's been coming on with us for a couple of years now. And Alex, you and I are somewhat similar in that I think for the rest of our lives, COVID is going to be an illuminating moment that we really can't forget because of what it revealed about so many of the institutions that surround us and the people who helm those institutions. And as I read the Mark Zuckerberg letter that he addressed to Jim Jordan, which acknowledged COVID censorship and also acknowledged that the FBI and or other elements of the United States government were actively trying to rig the story surrounding the Hunter Biden laptop, yet again, my jaw dropped at the revelation of it. But you're a former New York Times reporter, and I was talking with Miranda Devine, who broke a lot of these stories in the second hour with the New York Post.
Yep.
I am a New York Times subscriber. I read the newspaper every day, still in print form. They didn't cover it. They didn't cover Facebook CEO, who usually they cover with a fine-tooth comb when he says anything, saying that he was briefed by the United States government, and they told him that a laptop they were in possession of that they knew was real was fake. And they didn't really cover the revelations that our government tried to restrict what random Facebook users could post on the site, including clear humor, satire, and jokes. And a part of me looks at it and says, this is a culmination of the failure of the mainstream press to actually do its job. I imagine you still find this to be utterly jaw-dropping in the way that it's occurring because you're directly involved in a lawsuit surrounding all of this now.
Yes, I sure am, and it's a lawsuit that almost nobody has heard of, aside from, the people who subscribe to my Substack and maybe people who, listen to your show, and a few other, conservative outlets like Fox News has written about it a couple of times. But the mainstream media has essentially put a full blackout on my lawsuit. That may change now that Zuckerberg has spoken, although, as you say, the fact that his comments to Jim Jordan have been barely covered suggests that maybe it won't change. Here's what I would say that I think that I've been trying to emphasize lately because I think it is so important. So I was bounced from Twitter essentially at the insistence of the White House and Pfizer. A couple of Pfizer officials, some White House officials, and a guy named Andy Slavitt conspired to get me bounced from Twitter in late August 2021, 3 years ago. And my rights were violated, okay? And I'm suing to try to, to hold those people accountable. But here's what I think shouldn't be forgotten. I was bounced 10 days before the Biden administration announced vaccine mandates, okay? I was bounced because of my position that the vaccines might not be a cure-all for COVID and that they certainly shouldn't be mandated. And I now have proof that Twitter, the most senior officials at Twitter, viewed my speech as being about vaccine mandates. And so there were people out there, I am 100% certain of this, who would have been able to stand up for their rights and say, you can't do this to me. I'm an American adult, and if I don't want to get this mRNA vaccine, I shouldn't have to. And some of those people, I'm not saying there's a lot, but I know there are some, wound up vaccinated as a direct result of my being silenced. And that is a bigger scandal even than what happened to me, right? Because it's why I was silenced.
I mean, let me just kind of go in this direction. I am a First Amendment voter. That is, I can't pledge to you who I'm going to vote for the rest of my life. But I find this to be so incredibly important, what the government tried to do through Facebook, what we all went through with COVID, that I think I, along with a guy like RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk, that team, I think you're kind of a part of this team too, where I may not agree with a lot of what politicians say. I don't think that anyone out there should agree with everything that any politician says, because oftentimes parties end up collections of ideas that have no logical coherency or consistency. That's the reality of our modern American political process. But if you don't support a robust First Amendment, I think it's a single issue that should unite a lot of people who have a variety of perspectives. That's why I said RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk. I see it happening. Isn't our country truly at stake if you can't have rigorous and vigorous debate about all sorts of issues and the government itself should not be in a position. I just can't believe that this is even a debatable issue. It's scary to me that the government deputizing effectively Facebook as its censor is even in any way not being covered as a major story, or even scarier, that the New York Post and the New York Times and the Washington Post would be saying, yeah, sure, but censorship from the government is a good thing if we agree what they're trying to censor.
Yes, I mean, I think on that last sentence of yours is stunning. That there were media outlets openly calling for my censorship. Okay, and you know, even
and
today,
not arguing that you shouldn't be censored, which is an active act, right? But they were actually arguing the opposite. It wasn't just silence, which certainly occurred a lot, but also like a hey, yay, this is a good thing. There should be somebody who isn't able to say what he really thinks.
Yes, and that is just, it's such a degradation and a dereliction of the media as duties and a misunderstanding of the First Amendment. I can't believe that part either, right? These people viewed themselves as an arm of the Biden administration, and you know they forgot that this. Look, you can say the Pentagon. Okay, the Pentagon, they deserve, you know, strict coverage. They have their own interests. You know, they might want to go to war sometimes, and they certainly want to present wars as well as they can. And it's our job in the media to question that. You should feel exactly the same about the CDC if you're in the media. You should, you know, these people, they are an interest group. They are taxpayer funded, and it is in their interest to make the war on COVID look like it's going as well as it possibly can. And we're going to be skeptical and question them and what they say about vaccines and everything else. And so, and that was completely tossed out the window in 2020 and 2021. And by the way, there's been no reckoning. Again, These people, they didn't cover what Zuckerberg said. They are not covering my lawsuit. And let me tell you, we are amending our complaint, as I've said publicly. And in this new complaint, we have proof, black and white emails showing that the top executives at Twitter didn't think that my ban was correct. Okay, and that is a big story given the context, which was again about vaccines and vaccine mandates. And you know, I can just about guarantee you that's very unlikely to be covered. So they are not coming to terms with what they did, and they're not coming to terms with what the government did. It's really unbelievable.
We're talking to Alex Berenson. This is important, too, I think, for people out there who say, okay, well, it's in the past. Rob Flaherty, I think you could speak to this a little bit, is one of the most active out there in the Biden White House who was trying to get Facebook to censor you and many other people. He's now Kamala Harris's deputy campaign manager. So to your point, not only was there not a reckoning, a lot of people got promotions based on the lies and the censorship that they were involved in. So it's not just that this story is gone and everybody who was responsible has faded. They've actually risen and been given more power in many cases.
Yeah, you know, Flaherty's a defendant in Berenson v. Biden. Scott Gottlieb, who was and is a director of Pfizer and makes almost $500,000 a year on the board of Pfizer, you know, he's still on Face the Nation, you know, not every Sunday, but lots. Andy Slavitt, who has served at the center of the conspiracy, was another Biden White House official, remains very active in Democratic politics and active in healthcare policy. You're right. None of these people have faced any reckoning. But I do think, I think as bad as that is, it's worse that the media, which is theoretically nonpartisan, theoretically supposed to hold both sides and all government agencies accountable, has not done so.
We're talking to Alex Berenson. How does it get better? Like, let's pretend that you and me had a blue ribbon panel of people. We may not agree on anything else, but we believe that you should be able to argue anything, that robust and uninhibited debate is the very essence and foundation of United States freedom. What would you suggest needs to happen in the media?
Well, from a government point of view, it's very clear. Look, if I can't get my lawsuit to move forward, then these agencies will be able to do anything. Okay, it's short of saying, if you don't ban this guy, we're going to shut you down. Yeah. Anything short of that is going to be legal and allowed. And so my lawsuit actually is important because I have better evidence than the Missouri case. It's very much more specific. It's very targeted to me. I would say broadly, the conduct that was in the Missouri case that came out shouldn't be allowed. Okay, now if you're a government agency and you want to make your own statements about COVID and vaccines and everything else, go for it. But you should not target individual users or individual posts. Okay, it's not a fair fight. You really shouldn't target them publicly, and you really shouldn't target the platforms to try to get them not to carry them. I think that should be a base level. Now, what happened to me was a lot more specific than that, but I think that conduct broadly should be off the table. In terms of what has to happen in the media, it's funny, like I'm not in favor of a blue ribbon commission that would make any recommendations. I think the platforms need to be allowed generally to set their own rules. Now, if you're a super large platform like Twitter or Facebook and you're so dependent on Section 230 protection, maybe the standards for you, like you need to be regulated more like AT&T used to be in the old days, where essentially you have to carry all messages. That is a very complicated question, but there are probably reasonable answers to it that we're not near right now. But in terms of like how I get to speak, just let me speak. Like I have a Substack, right? So one of the things that happened to me after Twitter banned me is that I had a large and growing audience on Substack, which is a newsletter platform, and I still do. I have this newsletter called Unreported Truths, which anybody can sign up for, which is free. Now, Substack, I mean, you can pay for it, but it is free at core. Substack is not as good as Twitter as a mass platform because it doesn't have the same audience, but at least I was allowed to speak. But guess what happened? There were people going after me on Substack, trying to censor me there too. So that just really has to stop. Okay, so those are two things, and there's one specific thing that sort of has just occurred to me in the last few weeks, and I think this is something actually that both parties should agree with, and this is quite specific. If the platforms want to ban people and they sort of have, they have their own rules and they're following those rules, and you accumulate strikes and they ban you, okay. But the ban should be prospective. What I mean is when my Twitter account was silenced, it was taken offline for any outsider. I think you could maybe still see it if you were like a Twitter executive. It wasn't erased, but it was effectively erased to the public. And that should not be allowed. That is Orwellian. That is making history disappear. And that's, I think, something that Congress could change just by changing the sort of parameters of 230. They could make it very difficult for the platforms to do that. So I don't think the platform should be allowed to erase history.
Last question for you. You tried to take your kids, I think you have 3, to go visit the White House recently,
Yeah.
as many dads and moms all over the country have done on family vacations to D.C. What happened?
So I'm actually calling you or talking to you from D.C. right now, Union Station. We had a tour. We had made the request almost 3 months in advance. And, we were told by the office, it was actually Rand Paul's office, that they expected we'd be able to get in because, they have visibility into tour dates. And the request was denied. So the White House, and I can't prove that it was denied as a, sort of form of petty retaliation for my lawsuit, but I strongly suspect that. And it just shows you how petty these folks really are, that they would keep my kids from a, 45-minute standard White House tour that any American can get if they just, put in far enough in advance. It's so crummy and petty of them. And as somebody said on my Substack, somebody said, well, I wouldn't let you into my house if you were suing me either. And someone else said, it's not Biden's house, it's the people's house. And that's exactly right.
No doubt. Alex Berenson, have a good trip to D.C. We appreciate you coming on, sharing the latest with us. And by the way, is anybody going to get the new COVID shot? Is it basically everybody just said, it's worthless, nobody's getting it?
I mean, it's unbelievable. If you look at what's happened to Moderna and Moderna stock, people have rejected, it's not just that they've rejected the COVID shot. Moderna now has a shot for another virus called RSV, and people do not want mRNA shots, period. If there's a different kind of shot available, which there is for RSV, people will not take an mRNA shot. So no one's getting the COVID shot.
No doubt. Alex Berenson, you've been right about almost everything. Appreciate you sharing your latest with us.
Thanks, Clay.
And by the way, Alex, former New York Times reporter. So again, I think there are a lot of people waking up all over the country on a regular basis to this new media environment that we live in and saying, no, we're not going to handle this anymore. Rolling into the weekend, A lot of you on the road. In fact, my own wife on the road right now with our youngest child headed down to Florida. I'm going to join her on Friday. We're going to be down at the beach, probably take a lot of family photos, a lot of different fun events going on for Labor Day weekend. And if you're going to be doing that, hanging out with your friends and family over the Labor Day weekend, you may well sit back and think about things that you did in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, before there were digital photos, back when you had VHS tapes, back when you had actual photos. Maybe you're going to be sitting around saying, you know what I need to do? I need to make sure that I preserve all these family memories forever. And if you're thinking about that and you want everything to be digitized, you need to go to Legacy Box right now. They've got 55% off their regular prices. A great time to get in on this. Think of the hours of entertainment in your family's future, the old slides from summer vacations, the old VHS tapes, the old standard photographs that you used to have to print out yourself, maybe Polaroids, everything. You can get it all digitized for half the cost at legacybox.com/clay right now. 55% off. Great end of summer project in honor of Labor Day. Legacybox.com/clay for 55% off.